Welcome everyone to our second Public Safety Advisory Committee meeting. At our last meeting, we introduced everyone that's on this committee, talked to Chief Kroll about data and policies, which we will be reviewing in our next couple of meetings. And we collected questions, comments, and ideas from the public, which we'll be going over tonight. I did talk to Chief Kroll earlier this week to talk to him about our agenda tonight, and I'll be reporting back to him once we have the questions we collected, organized, and ready to go. I also wanted to mention that the Town of Manlius Police Department has released their annual community survey this week, and you can go to the townofmanlius.org to fill out the survey. So before we jump into our meeting for tonight, I wanted to check in with everyone about our communication between how communication is going between these meetings. I feel like emails have been productive and helpful. I felt like the email chain got a little hard to follow after a while, so it was great to get the public safety advisory email working, and everyone is receiving that now, so that's great. So I just wanted to check in and see if anyone had any questions or comments about the email address or communications, any concerns.
I have a related question, and that is, I was contacting several people, and they wondered where they could get more information from the website. So I know that's not so much communication between us, but in terms of making this available and visible to the public, I didn't know exactly what to tell them.
So about the committee?
Yeah. Well, and the work we're doing, as we carry this forward, how will the community be able to take notice of what we're doing?
So I created a public safety advisory page on the Town of Manlius website. So if you go on that right now, I believe right now, like, we've listed all the members. I've put the meetings we've scheduled so far on there. I tried to link our meeting there. I also added the resource that we've been all looking at, the New York State resource guide. So I added that there as well. So any kind of information we want to make sure it's getting out there, I think we can put it there. But if anyone else has any suggestions, I'm always open to hear.
So where would I'm at the website right now, and I don't know where I would
to under government boards and commissions. Under there is the public safety advisory.
I see it. Yep. Okay.
Okay. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, anything you want to add up there, always reach out.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions about kind of communications or anything like that? Okay, great. Okay, so before we jump all in, I wanted to do a little, just an agenda review to make sure we're all set. So tonight we'll be hearing from everyone. Just any comments you want to share about some of the stuff we've been looking at from the resources we've been reading. After we hear from everyone, we'll review the questions that were submitted to us. And then we'll we'll also talk about calendar and our schedule to see how we're doing there. I think too, after we've read all the resources and then look at the questions, we should have more of an idea of what work we're taking on and maybe how many meetings we'll need to accomplish that, because we do have a deadline. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll discuss how we move forward with reviewing policies to help us plan for the next meeting, because our next meeting will be reviewing some of the policies we've received. So any kind of issues or questions or comments or additions to the agenda, or does that all sound good? Great, okay. Okay, so the first thing, so we're just gonna go around, and I thought we'd switch it up. Not everyone's here, so let's see, hold on. We'll just go around, and if you want to share, that would be great. So we'll go, I was going to go opposite order of alphabetical. That sounds real hard. Let's see, Tony's not here. Sally, I saw Sally. Would you like to go?
Sure. I found that letter that one gentleman, I was trying to look for it and I couldn't find it right away, that wrote to us, that really lengthy one, as he talked about George Floyd. And I thought he was so articulate and certainly brought up lots of questions within that letter. A lot of the things that we're going to be dealing with. And I found some of the things that he was asking were some of the same questions that I'm hearing from community members, from my neighbors, or if I'm at the Y, wherever I am, and I tell them, you know, I'm on the committee and so on and so forth, and I ask them if they have anything. And it's the same kind of thing. What training do the officers have? What's the, how are they hired? You know, do they get training afterwards, after something has happened? Is there a way for them to, talk to a social worker perhaps? Or could we bring a social worker on board to help these officers and to give them training? So I think that's what's really been on my mind the most, is just the consistency in the questions over and over.
Great, thank you. Okay. So Ryan?
Perfect. Yeah, no, the letter by Stanley was great. I think he's a main contributor for the Post Standard and Syracuse.com. And just because I know other topics are probably going to be asked by other people, some of the couple of things I wanted to bring up were just a lot of people on the community questions, same thing, have been talking about what are the stats and figures, and trying to get a lot of questions answered. And a great first step was we looked at the census and we got a little bit of data there. But there are a lot of questions about our demographics being put into place, or is there a certain amount of info that we have on that we can share publicly. And it goes to just that kind of 10th step that the Department of Justice put out that's in the handbook, and 3, 9, and 10 all kind of go together. 3, fostering an atmosphere of openness and transparency, but 9 and 10 go to the metrics and reevaluating what those metrics are and incorporating the procedures based on the metrics, and also the community engagement based on the metrics that we find, because every community is going to be different. So we're going to have strengths, and potentially we'll find some maybe deficiencies that could be improved upon that area. When looking at the Maxwell study, and I think the Maxwell study program is awesome. I participated in it myself. It explicitly states no demographics or other information were taken. It reads very specifically as a customer service survey, which we know the department is not, you know, a business or a corporation who needs a customer service type information. Of course, we need a officer, department to citizen contact sort of information within that survey. But I think it could be a little bit more descriptive, and also some of the formatting of when we send out these surveys, when it says Town of Manlius Police Department and not Syracuse Maxwell School doing a survey on. When it asks for, even if it's optional, contact information first, instead of the actual questionnaire to be filled out and just the pertinent information that we need, I think that opens up access for more people. And I think some of those other questions that are asked on the spreadsheet could be answered a little bit more openly if we had a little bit of more demographics and a little bit different questions than just yes, no, did you like it, did you not, what town are you coming from, ethnicity, sex, how do you identify, all that kind of stuff. So I think those are important questions. At least I think they're important based on the handbook, and that might be helpful as a questions posed to the chief. So.
Great, thank you. And I think because they have their survey out right now too, so it's important for us to take that in, to share it, and we can see how that process goes since they're starting it now. Rob?
I don't have any, can you hear me okay? I don't have any specific comments other than reviewing through the workbook. I think that any officer would support the repeal of 50A, you know, that's not, that's not a bad thing. I found the workbook to be very heavy in terms of a feeling of, as a former police officer, I read it that it has a tenor in my mind of you know, it's putting a lot of judgment on law enforcement initially without acknowledging, and that's not a document designed to do that, but without recognizing that not everything is broken and not everyone is bad. But I understand the purpose of it. But that being said, I think you'll find as we go and we review locally some of the existing policy, they already will address many of those things. In fact, even the language is the same, you know, bias-based policing. It mimics what the report suggests should be the model, and it's actually in place. Now, is it functioning well in place? Well, that's a topic for us to explore, but you know, a lot of that is already there. The ban on chokeholds, things like that. I did want to comment on one thing. On page 91, the procedural justice comment about working with the community. Years ago, when we had the Citizens Police Academy, and this is kind of a narrow focus, but it goes to a broader concern. There was, when we had that opportunity, there was a shoot, don't shoot scenario that members of the Citizens Police Academy could avail themselves of. We went out to the air base where they had the federally provided technology. You know, it's probably $200,000 or $300,000 to do this. And without fail, the members of the CPA, when they came back and they were integrating back in the shifts, you know, they would ride as a observer, and you would either ask them or they would say, wow, that was the most enlightening thing I've ever done. I had no idea how quickly you need to make a decision. You know, I succeeded or I failed, but it was very enlightening. And it's unfortunate that that might not be an opportunity for other people right now. I don't know if the technology exists, but I think to your point, Elaine and John, what you put out with, you know, Chief Kroll responding to what we're doing. I think Nadine highlighted this in her comment that said, we already, there's so much that you should know that you don't know, and we want you to know. And we want, I say we, because we want this committee initially to be as well informed. So you have a, you know, no, it's frustrating that you don't know. It's shameful that you don't know, but now is the time to start that process. And I'm excited to see that move forward. And I'll conclude it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, when I was going through the workbook, I did see some things that I know that we are doing, but then it's so important to make sure that we say that, hey, we're doing this and we've done this since, you know, X amount of years, or be a leader. Nadine, would you like to go?
I actually am not as eloquent as Rob is, but yeah, he spoke, I think, to my frustrations. You guys can hear me now, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like, I guess I didn't know that there was so much unknown about the Manlius Police Department. Like, when you guys start digging into this, you're going to find out that, I mean, we banned chokeholds before I got out of the academy, which was in 1990. So like we don't, like, there's so much, and that's just a very easy example to point at that, like, it's not something, I mean, I'm 50 years old. I retired 10 years ago, and they're still being trained the right way. Like, so I feel like one of the things I feel like we could highlight with Chief Kroll is, I was struck by the amount of questions I got from people that said, you guys only have 600 hours of training. And I'm like, you have no idea how much training an officer goes through just to become a police officer. And then the amount of training that the officers have to have. So I feel like a lot of these questions we have and a lot of the conversations we're having, they frustrate me because the answers are already there. Like, the answers are just got to ask Mike. Like, just ask Chief Kroll and he'll tell you. And it's all documented. Like one of the things I've also found is that people don't understand how educated and how distinct the Manlius police rules are. So everything we did is documented. So every ounce of training we have, I believe my training records are still there. So your training records, police reports are kept for 25 years. So like anything you want is going to be there. Like if you had needed to ask Mike how many people were arrested last year and how many use of forces were used, he probably knows that number off the top of his head and can produce the report numbers and give it right to you. So it's almost frustrating to me I feel like we're wasting a lot of time. Like I feel like give them the questions, have them answer them, and we can delve deeper. And what Rob just said is true, is we need to make sure that those procedures are being followed. We need to make sure that they're still intact and people are doing the right thing. You know, I've been asked several times about the hiring process. It's surprising to me that people don't know that you have to take a civil service test, be on a civil service list to get hired. So you can't hire people who aren't on the list. So if you only have, 150 white males on a list, that's who you can choose from. You can't go off the list and choose somebody else. So I feel like those are the pieces of I think they're common knowledge information that we can get out there pretty easily. So how do you become a police officer? Take a civil service test. Like, to me, I think those are things that we can probably answer without belaboring them too much. Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you. Christine, you're all set.
Hi there. So a couple of things. One is I think that I get that frustration because one of the central issues really is education and communication, right? So understanding what is happening already, and I think that that's kind of what we're trying to figure out, is how to get that information out in ways that make an impact, because people actually aren't going to the police chief and asking the question. So like, how is a good way to, because it's so cliche, but it's so true, knowledge is power. So like, when you learn more about your police department and learn what they have to offer, that can build a lot of trust. And also when they're transparent, which, we're talking about that distrust between the community or communities and their police department, a lack of knowledge will perpetuate that. So I agree with that. I think we need to keep that conversation going about educating people. And keeping with what Rob said about a lot of things already being in place, I didn't just get ideas. I didn't just get questions. I also got a lot of thank yous to the police department for things that they did really well, or that they are doing really well, that really rescued people from certain situations that were egregious. And so that was another piece of this that was just excellent to get back, along with a lot of questions that may be pretty basic to the police department, but are not basic to the public because they just don't know. So that was what I had to say about that. And then with the workbook, clearly the workbook is comprehensive for New York State. So it might not all apply to the Town of Manlius Police Department. And, but as I was going through it, first of all, there's just so much, but there's two things. One is the questions that they posed after each of those sections. I thought, wow, these are probably questions that a lot of people have because they don't know. So that could be a really good resource for us to just collect those questions and answer them for the public. I know I would love to know. I think it's a wonderful thing. And then the other piece was the mental health and the crisis intervention. I do have some thoughts on that. I don't know what our department has. Again, I don't know what we have available, but what I do know is that I would like to have a conversation about, or start a conversation about what we do have and what it would look like to do something if they don't have plainclothes officers and a mental health professional working together on a crisis intervention team, and how that all might be seen by the police department. And then my final thought is that this is a lot to digest, and I think it's worthwhile to digest. And the one thing that I didn't see, and I would love to see, is to understand how the police themselves and the staff feed back to the department about issues that arise for them and anonymously, because I do work with a lot of police officers, and I do know that repeatedly for the last 12 years that's come up of, I want to feed this back, but I don't know how in my department, because I don't want to be marginalized. I don't want to be seen as the problem creator. So, and I have some suggestions around that, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I had a bunch of reactions. I think the first was to say, to look at the plan that they put on early in the book, the quarterly plan kind of. I thought that was a nice outline, and I'd like to see us be able to address that directly sooner rather than later, so that we have kind of a process we expect to go through, and we're not racing at the end to get something together. So I thought that was helpful and useful. And I also thought, recognizing this as a document for all the state, having the discussion about what are the many roles that police play in our community, and how are they unique, and all, is just a great place to have a discussion, because I don't think we're facing some of the problems that other places are facing, but it doesn't mean we couldn't, there isn't good work that could be done. I did have a concern, and it's kind of come up already. Robert, when I read that, I did not see a bias against police. All right, but I haven't had a whole lot of experience with police. So to me, I've seen a lot of that in the discussions already leading up to this, is people are saying, oh, you're either going to defund the police, or, the police are great, there's nothing we can do. And the divisiveness has already kind of begun. So I think one of my thoughts was, we're not here to crucify the police. We're here to have a look and see, educate people what's going on, and say, what could be better. We can all get better. There's no big deal with that. So I think something that we might be able to do as a committee to educate all the public, to say, this is why we're doing this. It's not just, we have this mandate and that's what got it kicked off, but here's our objective. It's, and maybe diminish some of that. I was especially disappointed to see that Manoa felt they had to have a police pride day in response to this. I mean, that just, not that we shouldn't be proud of our police, but we don't need to start drawing us and them kind of things. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, I hear the frustration over people who understand how the system works. And this is all out there, why people aren't asking. Well, I don't think people have had a way of organizing their asking. The community really is a bunch of individuals. And I think one of the services we can provide is to give the average citizen a way in without having to go to the police chief to find out what's going on, because that could be intimidating. But if we're seen as a community resource that I would hope would persist after this mandate is over, where people could actually form a relationship with the department and feel like they have some kind of not so much a voice, but I guess in a talking and listening perspective, not a complaining perspective, that I think that would help with the notion that, well, this information is all out there, why don't they just ask for it? I think we should just say, okay, we need to do some education. I'm first to tell you, I don't know. But I'd like to be able to put that in a way that lets people know, oh, I have a concern. I can always go to this committee and find out without having to feel like I'm going to the police and complaining. So that's it.
Yeah. I'll go to Dominique.
Hi. I just want to say, yes, Jim. That's perfect. You couldn't have said it any better. My kind of whole thing is just in general that I keep hearing that, we do these things, we have these policies in place, but like people have been saying, I have no idea as a resident what any police department's policies are. And then if I don't know what they are, how am I supposed to keep them accountable for those policies? I'm gonna say this, I'm afraid of the police. Anytime they come to anything, I see them driving by, instead of saying, hey, that's my neighborhood cop that's gonna keep me safe, I go, make sure you're doing everything you're supposed to do, you don't wanna get pulled over. And that, I'm gonna be honest, doesn't have to do with the skin of my, that I have, but just because they police too much. How am I supposed to know what my rights are or what the policies are that they may or may not be broken if it's not public knowledge? Being transparent is also something that I feel that needs to happen as well. If we already were transparent and that's already happening, why aren't we posting it? Why aren't we being open with your citizens? Cops are here to protect us, to help us in situations, and not necessarily saying that the whole FM police department is like that, but there are definitely officers who do not make me feel welcome. So if one person doesn't make me feel welcome, they all don't make me feel welcome, because I don't know who is going to make me feel welcome. I'm going to assume if that officer is going to treat me that way, the other officer is going to treat me that way, because they're an employee of the police department and they should all treat everyone the same way. Sorry, once I have notes. I guess that's basically my thing. We just have to keep everyone accountable to whatever policies that we put in place or we suggest, or even the policies that are already here. That's fine. If they work, they're working. But if they're not working for one person, they're not working for everyone. That's all.
Thank you. Bill Harris, would you like to go? Oh, we can't hear you. Can you unmute?
You're muted, Bill.
Yeah, not anymore.
There you go. Thank you.
I've heard a lot this evening, and I agree with much of what has been said. Educating the public as to how well qualified our police department is certainly something that we can do. But and I'm concerned about those citizens that feel that they can't be arrested and are perhaps above the law. And educating the public to not resist will take away the use of force. And again, the atrocities, believe me, that exist, the wrongful deaths, abhorrent, okay? But I really feel that part of our duty is to say, don't resist, please don't. And our law officers, if you don't break the law, you won't have a problem. Notwithstanding, we need to look at everything. And education is a two-way street. And I'm glad I'm part of this committee. So stay well, everyone.
Thank you. And Bill Kirchhoff?
Hi, everybody. And I like Bill Harris. I'm thrilled to be a part of this group. And I've read all 140 pages of the New York State Playbook on police reform. I've listened to a whole host of back and forth on the Nextdoor sites and asked a number of my neighbors and friends. And to be honest with you, the overwhelming reaction to the town of Manlius has been, and the police force here has been very positive, and the overwhelming issues that I hear about have to do with other towns and other municipalities. But that being said, I love the fact that we've got the opportunity here to educate on both ends. And three things that I brought out of all the discussions I've had are bias. How can we educate both sides? And it seems like people are polarizing. How can we educate both sides on the biases that we have, and how can we move together? One thing, the chokehold scenario, I bet if you asked a good portion of my son's age group whether or not town of Manlius instituted chokeholds, they would probably have said yes. And it's hasn't been here in a long time. There's a bias on both sides. I think it's the transparency and the process of education that we're going to be going through here have helped me to be able to respond. The second thing is protection. I really truly believe that we need to protect both our police officers and those that are, in the process of being detained or arrested. I think it's clear to me, and that they're both in a very volatile situation during that. And if the more education that we can, and put ourselves in each other's shoes more, that we could learn to potentially, prevent a potential issue. Although, again, I don't think the town of Manlius is representative of a lot of what needs to be done in reform, but I think that that part of the protection, both sides need to be protected in that instance. And I think the reform is bridging and educating us towards that. The third part, I've seen the biggest change in the last 10 to 20 years is mental health. And that's what's the difference between what I think has happened recently, is that we're dealing not so much anymore with the tried and true criminal that we saw back in, TV shows like One Adam 12 back in the day, and all the different, I think that in today's case, you find a lot of what the police have to go forward with is mental health issues, and how can we better bridge the gap on both training and or partnerships with mental health providers to be able to intervene in those scenarios, to de-escalate, and to potentially bridge what could become a real detrimental, situation. So that's basically what I'm thinking. I'm thrilled to be a part of this group, and I look forward to participation.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Tony.
Hello, everyone. Does everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I think there have been a lot of good points made tonight. Jim Brule made a wonderful point, as well as both bills, which is one of the primary reasons I joined this committee. As I stated early on when we introduced ourselves, and maybe some information I didn't state, I'm originally from the South, and I didn't move to the Syracuse area until 2013. And one thing I don't want to happen is for the Manlius Police Department to be placed in a box, which is one thing I'm really, really against, is when you take individuals or organizations and place them in a box, because the town of Manlius is not, a police department in Los Angeles. It's not a police department in the Midwest. It's the town of Manlius Police Department. I've had many interactions with a lot of the police officers. My family and I like to be engaged. We're a military family. Serving 21 years, I'm all about engagement, whether it's with the community or those around. And the town of Manlius does a lot. They jump at the opportunity to have community engagement. They open their doors on a regular basis, and this will sadly be probably the first year my family and I will not be at one of the events hosted at the Town of Manlius Police Department because of the current situation we're in. We've been pretty much, personalized tours throughout every aspect of that police department. And they're just a wonderful group of people. And I was speaking with one of the officers a couple of weeks ago. We were just talking about current events, and I was asking how they were doing. And they have a few, new officers that have joined, and they're, some of them were feeling a little down in the aspect of, they don't really know what to do in the state of the world right now. And he basically told them that you love what you're doing. You wanted to be a police officer, to work with your community, to be a protector. Just keep the faith, hold true to what your job is all about, what that badge stands for, and just do your job, do it well, and everything will work out. And I see that happening because I see somewhat a shift in the tide where some people are jumping on bandwagons of something that doesn't really affect our community. But at that same aspect, can things be made better? Of course. I've watched, my time in the military and times now where, being in the Air Force, things weren't always that great, and they worked and made, bountiful strides in making the community of the Air Force so much better. And they're still working to improve, as well as a lot of issues with other branches of the military. We're working to improve. There is no perfection, but you can always strive toward perfection, which, I think we're here for, and we're here to work alongside the Manlius Police Department to try to improve what aspects they already have that are working great. Yes, there have been horrible events taking place in our nation, and it's very, very sad. But once again, that isn't a reflection of what has happened here. And I, for one, feel sad for those that throughout our nation, throughout, different parts of the Syracuse area that get nervous when they see a police officer. And, have I been pulled over? Absolutely. I'm not perfect, but at the same time, I'm not a bad guy. You don't retire from the military with a top secret SCI clearance if you're a bad guy. But, sometimes I get a little heavy in the foot, and each and every time, whether it's been nighttime, the professionalism of the police officers in the area have even surprised me. I mean, I was pulled over one night because of tent. I was well within the New York State laws with that. The police officer had me roll up my window because I'm like, yeah, my car's a little dirty. He said, oh, don't worry about it. He took his shirt, wiped my window off, and then said, okay, you're good to go. He said, but I need you to hold on 1 second. He pulled this car across the road, turned his lights on because the area that I was driving to get home is very dark. He said, I want to make sure that you're able to pull out safely because there's no street lights here. I want to make sure you pull out safely. And they see these lights and people are going to stop. It's been, whether it was, hey, I learned, which I did not know it was the law, that you can't have the plastic covers over your license plate. I know some states you can't have them shaded, but New York State, you can't have anything over. The officer told me about it. She said, hey, just, whenever you get a chance, take care of that so you don't run into any other issues. Asked me to roll down my back window so she can hand my kids stickers. That's the type of interactions that I've had, in my time being in New York since I moved here back in 2013. And I hope lots of other people have had that. But as Bill Harris said, I don't want a situation or even to feed into a stereotype or a stigma of people thinking that, well, or police officers being pushed in the corner where it's like, okay, well, I don't want to pull this person over. I don't want to talk to this person because I don't want to. If you're doing something wrong, you're doing something wrong. And I expect the police officers to do their job, and I expect, for people to adhere to what they're asking them to do. But at the same time, I want them to be protected and for the appropriate amount of force to be used as needed. But at the same time, we do need to protect our police officers. They're in a very vulnerable position all the time. And I think there's 3 factors that are contributing to a lot of the things that we've been seeing over the past few months. In light of that, I think there's some individuals out there who somehow slipped through the cracks. They may jump from police department to police department because they may have been fired, but there's no regulation right now that says if you're fired from one department, you can't go to the next state or somewhere to another county and be hired. They don't have a regulation like the military where, hey, you can't cut it. You're not adhering to the standards of the U.S. military, and you're not living by our code, then you're gone. You don't say, okay, well, I couldn't cut it in the Air Force. Let me walk down to the Army recruiter. No, you're done. And that would be a great thing to happen because, like I said, there's some people who slip through the cracks who have a chip on their shoulder. I don't think it's necessarily systemic racism. I think that there's some out there who have a chip on their shoulder and think that they are above the law, but that's not every police officer. Do I think racism still exists? Absolutely. And I think there's some people that are in the badge that have that. There's people throughout the country that have that. There's no magic potion or machine that can say, they can read you like, oh, you know what, you're racist or you're a bad person. You don't know, which is why reform does have to be put into place to handle those individuals. And I think, lastly, there are good police officers out there who have been exposed and dealt with certain situations, as Christine noted earlier on in our original meeting. They have PTSD, and when they're put in certain situations, you react a way that you may not have used to react. And I think the tide has continuously shifted. In the military, has shifted where people are actually going to get help. You're getting debriefed when you're coming back from deployments. I think the tide has to continually shift within our police departments where people don't feel that they're at risk of losing their job, where they're at risk of saying, oh, you're not really a strong person or a strong man. Like, hey, if you need help, go and get it. Someone needs to walk you through this. You saw something that normal people don't see, and you never know how you're going to react to seeing certain things until it happens. And sometimes that hits you, like, I didn't know I was going to react that way. I do need to talk about this. I do need to get counseling to help me through this so I can continue on doing my job in an appropriate manner. That needs to come to light, because I think that's the third part of this is you've got good police officers out there who get in certain situations and they react because of PTSD, and they don't react the way they would like to react or the way they used to react. And I think those factors need to be put into play, and certain things to be taken into account to once again help those police officers through that and change the mentality that may still exist out there, that and just let them know you don't need to be afraid to ask for help. Everyone needs help.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I did see a special of that, and I can't recall, I don't know if anybody else saw this, where the police department and prison systems were working together with a lot of mental health, and they basically were getting a lot of prisoners, a lot of individuals, the help that they needed in counseling in the prisons, and it actually saved money because it costs more to keep the people incarcerated versus to get them the help they needed. And a lot of people, there were a lot of success stories in getting the people the mental health that they needed, so they're not in and out of the prison system or the jail system, and it actually ended up saving a lot of money. So thanks everybody for their time.
Thank you. And Alan, I know you have to go soon, but
Thanks. Yeah, so I read through the general orders and the workbook and the Google Sheet, and I think, for the general orders, they're clear, but and they're updated, which is good. It shows the years that they're updated. I just wonder what the mechanism is for enforcement or review every year. And I know the chief talked last meeting about, that there are yearly reviews and like a training day. I just wonder, if that's enough so officers know and the community knows the policies for general orders. The workbook had really good case studies that I thought were important for everyone to consider. But particularly, I was drawn to the restorative justice section, and it talked about the nature of restorative justice is for healing and not only for correction, but not about punishment, but trying to right wrongs or try to heal, mend conflict in communities. And I think that's an important aspect to look at in the future. But also through the general orders and the workbook, but also the questions on the Google Doc, I think updating the police frequent asked questions on the website, I think there's like 15 on there right now. There should probably be like 115 on there, because a lot of the things we're talking about and the community is talking about, they're already there in some form or fashion, but it's just not organized in such a way where it could be easily accessed. And I think the community would really benefit from an expanded FAQ section. Throughout all of the documentation, not knowing enough about police training, I just wonder, the training that's done with all these different, bias trainings and use of force training and all the training that officers go through before becoming an officer and also after, how is that carried out? Is it done by the state? Is it done by an outside person? Is it the same person? Should that be changed up so that there's not too much or comfortability with who's doing the training. Is it internal? Is it external? That type of thing. I also know that, just the Manlius Police Department, they do a lot of community events. I've been to them, bring my kids to them, my family. I think those are important. But throughout all of this, I did think about not only the mental health well-being of the officers, but also the community. And, the national conversation about, social workers or expanding that role in a police department, if, that could be explored as something both for the community, but also for the officers, whether it's a liaison or someone specifically trained for social work. And I did see that one of the general orders is geared towards mental health. And there is a whole outline of how to deal and the resources and the protocol for that. So I was glad to see that. But also I was thinking about just stigmas for the officers, that if they see something that they're uncomfortable with, that maybe a fellow officer is doing, or maybe there's stigmas of trying to get help, what are some action steps to remove some of those barriers, culture change. I know at one point there were chaplains in the department, mental health professionals needed. And the last thing I'll say is, I do check the Facebook feed for the police department. And I think they're trying to inform the public on different things, but I definitely think social media is a big part of this. That I know the chief said in the last meeting, they don't have a big budget for a social media person, but I think that's important. When I did consultant work for social media for nonprofits, the big thing is to tell the story. And if you tell the story and get it out there, more people are reading Facebook to get their news now than they did 5 or 8 years ago. And so I think there really needs to be some investment about telling the story of everything that we're doing, the police department's doing, the initiatives, the training, public feedback, comment. I think there needs to be more focus on that, but it's a lot of information to consume, but those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you. John, do you want to share anything?
So I've been taking a lot of notes, and I'm really, so I think everything I would have said about the workbook and the materials we've been looking at has pretty much been covered. But what I'm really happy to see is that there's there's a couple major themes that are coming to the forefront here. And I was just jotting them down while everybody was kind of talking. I know I've been kind of thinking about it as we've been looking at our communications and all these questions. And, I think in no particular order, we're looking at transparency as the first one. Not that there's a lack of it. It's just that it could be more. It could be a little bit more, I think, Alan, as you were just saying, like tell the story, like it can be a little bit more intentional and a little bit more just active in trying to explain what's going on. Maybe, we could see, there's a lot of different things. A lot of the things that we're doing are working, but I think that's a really good area for us to look at is transparency and how do we make it more known. I think the education piece that we were talking about a little bit earlier is a big part of it, is making sure the citizens know that, we have probably the most certified police department in the county, probably the region. And I think that could be a really big part of what we're doing here, and kind of continuing on forward and seeing how we could maybe look at adding citizens to the police committee, expanding or having a police commission where you'd have citizens that are actively advocating and bringing, attention to the police department so that we can have those conversations out in the open, and that we're actively, we essentially have people that are bringing more people in the whole time. Mental health, it came up in for both the police officers and for the general public that they serve. A lot of people have mentioned the idea of whether it's a plainclothes officer and a trained mental health counselor, but also at the same time understanding, how many of these calls are essentially mental health issues. But we do have to remember there's a lot there because it goes through dispatch, and how would the dispatch would have to be trained to send the correct unit there. We would have to have additional units on the police force. Reforming the survey a little bit to make it. I know we brought up that it was randomized to who it goes to. Both of them, the big one that's happening now and the monthly one. I think that would be a really good place to make sure. I know we were talking about access and how do you actually engage folks last time. So I think that's a really good place to look at. And we, I think even in the satisfaction survey that was the monthly one, it even said, the Maxwell student even said that it was random essentially. So that's definitely a place that we can expand on. And then internal issues, how can officers advocate for themselves, possibly anonymously? How can they, if they see an issue, bring that to light and allow for like some culture change? And also too, what mental health services are there for officers so that, they don't end up in a stress, they aren't in any way additionally stressed when they're dealing with, every day they're dealing with something crazy. It would be good, to make sure that we're taking care of them just like we would take care of any other employee of the town or any other department. We need internal services to make sure that the services we're providing are adequate and effective. And, we're taking care of folks because we want our officers to stay here. We do a lot of training and we invest a lot in them, and hopefully they're a part of our community, and they are. And we want to, continue that as much as possible and maintain that. But just in general, I think the conversation so far has been really great. I know we have some housekeeping to do, but I'm looking forward to keeping this conversation going.
Great. Yeah, so I think after hearing from everyone, if anyone has any kind of thoughts or comments to kind of wrap this up, and then we'll move into the questions. So Jim, would you like to go?
Yeah, just about transparency, because I think, we're all agreed that that's a good thing. One of the questions I got a lot was a pair. I'm really happy with the way the police have treated me every time I've needed them. And everyone I see being pulled over on East Genesee is a person of color. All right. So we have these two things. And we can say we're transparent. We could say, well, those records are out there, go look for yourself. But I think what we can do is to say, well, we recognize that that's a concern. So maybe we can do some of the work for the people to say, look, you all are worried about this. We've gone and we've looked and here's what we found. So I think there's more to what we can do than just provide transparency, because transparency, if you don't know where to look, doesn't mean anything. So I just like to add that to it. I think we can take a little extra effort on our part to say, yes, all this is there, but it's a big morass. And now that we know what you're interested in, we can start to uncover some of that information for you and just let you know. And I don't mean to restrict it to that question. I'm just saying in general, that's something that we could provide.
Great. I saw Christine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I was thinking about, I know that there was the police support event, and I was invited to that. And I love the police, support the police. I although I didn't go, and there was a reason for that. And the reason was, I really think that we do, as a town, as a community, need to really put our foot down based on the national conversation right now and elevate our conversation beyond the us and them. We really need to be, we need to decide to be unique about that and recognize that there can't be an us and them if we all live together in this community. So my thought is that, like, we can go beyond that and set the standard. So the standard would be, like, we all live here and we'll all be impacted, like Dominique said. If one person is impacted by anything, then maybe that's just where we need to put some attention to be better. And it's not an all or nothing proposition that they're doing everything wrong or everything right. It's just we operate as a community in a way that we can be really proud of, and we lead the pack, right? So, and then as to Tony, you got me thinking about how the police and the mental health inside of the police departments, and that is something I've dealt with a lot. And there is a lot of, keep the faith, keep moving. There's a lot of police officers under a lot of pressure right now. And there's been a lot of mental health progress since historically we had chaplains in place. And now there's been a lot of movement and education in mental health that I think we could take advantage of inside of departments and help the officers even more. And so that's, oh, and I don't know if anybody read my article about open and closed systems, but what we're doing here is we're opening up the system to become what they call transformation ready, which is, the flow of communication. We're just elevating that. So that's all I had to say about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like just to say one thing.
Sure.
It's kind of in regards where Tony said that he's had great interactions with the police and they're super nice and super supportive and whatnot. And I am so glad that you've had those interactions, but I can name about 15 other interactions just in the past 3 years where have not gone that smoothly. Just a couple of weeks ago, someone very close to me was stopped at a stoplight. And they didn't know they were getting pulled over. And when they finally realized it, the cop pulled them over, they asked them why they were evading the cops. And they were like, I didn't know you were pulling me over. I'm so sorry. Did everything, gave, license, registration, everything that they were doing what they needed to do. And they went to scratch their nose. And another cop came over and said, for your safety and mine, don't move. That's not okay. That is an officer in the police department. So if that person had that interaction, how many other people are having that interaction? And I've had great interactions with police as well, doing all the rallies at the Matilda Jocelyn Gage Center. They've been nothing but wonderful. I've lost a phone and one of the officers did everything that she could possibly do to try to find my phone. So I've had great interactions, but just like the one I just stated, that and many, many others, to myself, to my family, to the people that are in my circle, that's not the case. So I don't also want this to be an umbrella of, oh, FM police department, we're really great, and we might be really great, but we need to do better. We need to do better, and we need to do better.
Can I ask a question? Dominique, I'm sorry. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Is there, I had this written down, but I don't know. I need glasses, guys. So here's my question. So as regards what happened with Dominique, that type of situation, or her friends or people she knows, my question would be, do we have a mechanism by which to hold someone accountable, or even just address interactions like that for someone to go, and maybe this is where restorative justice comes into the conversation, is if there has been an issue like that, maybe that's where also mental health professionals could be a part of a healing piece between a community member and a police officer. Because they're people. They're not going to be perfect, and they will make mistakes. Right. So hopefully we can move forward in some unique way that way. That's all I had to say, Dominique, about your situation. I don't know if there is a mechanism for you in that.
But no, that would, somewhere where we can elaborate on what happened and how we feel, and make it known. And also with the surveys, they're random, but I don't think they should be random. I think every person that is in this community, every residential household should get a survey about whatever the questions may be. Because then you have a whole community consensus of what it is, not just a couple random people. And, like I said, FM police are not doing a terrible job. I've seen great things happen, but I also have seen the things that everyone is concerned about. So it is real, and we need to acknowledge that is real. We can't say, oh, well, we're great. If we all get great responses back. Well, that's great, but we're not asking the people that are having difficulties with the police what their experiences are. And those things are being overlooked because they don't know.
Can I
Uh,
just say, I'm not gonna, I just wanted to answer Christine's question. There is a mechanism in place. The problem is are we open enough for people who are having that problem that Dominique is expressing to go to the police? Because basically the mechanism is you call the police department. So the reality of it is that are we open enough? Are police open enough that our constituents, our customers feel that they can call and say, hey, I wasn't treated well. Can we deal with this? Can we come in and talk to you about this? Because there's a mechanism. It's been this, the mechanism is it's a chain of command. And I don't know this from being retired at Manlius. I actually work as a clerk at the town of DeWitt Police Department. So when somebody has a complaint, they call in and they ask to speak to the officer supervisor, and the officer supervisor takes the call, and then it goes from there. So there is a mechanism, and if it doesn't get resolved the way they want it to, it goes a step above, and they can ultimately fall onto the town supervisor and the police committee or the town board. So there is already but again, I think that when we talk about transparency and communication, I just would like to know the best way to do that, because the survey right now is on Facebook and anybody can take it. The one thing I worried about today when I took it was anybody can. So somebody that doesn't live in the town, or somebody who doesn't live in the state, can take the test. So it is not, this one isn't random. Anybody can go on and take it.
Those that have access to the internet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So if we mailed those, would that be what you're looking at, Dominique?
I think so. I think to be very intentional to make sure anything the police department sent out isn't just for the media. It's also in the physical hands of every resident.
Okay. I mean, that's a great idea, but I think the reason it wasn't done for years is because there's a huge cost involved in that. Huge. And that's not,
I think that's something that should be looked at then.
Right.
Well,
but
and there's a
difference.
There's a difference between being random and representative, right?
Right.
And you can have your survey go to a representative sample, which won't necessarily get hit if you just do a random sample. So it takes more work. You don't have to send it to everybody to get it to be representative, but for it to be representative, you have to know who everybody is and say, these are the constituencies we want to be sure to hit.
So I think that's a lot of really good information. And I think what we should be looking at as I know Elaine's going to keep us moving on the agenda, and we're going to talk about next steps. But, I've added to kind of those major ideas is I don't want to call it the complaint process, because that's not fair. It shouldn't be seen that way. But I think that's something that as a committee, we can really have a conversation about what does that look like when it's working? What does it look like when someone has a bad or a good interaction with a police officer and they wanted it somehow addressed? And I've had people tell me that it feels like, they filled something out, they handed it in, and nothing really came of it. Right or wrong, I've never gone through the process myself. But asking how can that be opened up, Nadine, like you were saying, like there's a process where it goes up the whole chain of command, and I don't know if there is something in place where it would ever come to any of the elected officials to shed light on something, or the police committee, and I think that would be a really good place that we could explore. I mean, when we think about the goal is to provide a suggestion to the town board of how we can change our policies. Whether it's coming up with a real, reformed process, or suggesting changes, or suggesting a next step, or, some way that a person could essentially keep pulling on that system until they feel satisfied, to a reasonable extent, obviously. But I do think, I think when we take a step back and realize our goal here, like, let's start thinking collectively, what does that process look like that is satisfying to residents, that it doesn't open our officers up to undue abuses, with thousands of complaints coming in from one person who had a bad experience, but how can we make this process a little bit more equitable for everybody? Because if someone does have a bad experience, our goal needs to be to address that as quickly and as, not discreetly, but it needs to be addressed quickly, because if someone has a bad experience and it's never resolved, or it's never, there's never any resolution, that now becomes an emotion that kind of goes forward, and that could move out to other residents. And that's what we don't want. We want everyone to feel like it's their police department. They should be able to have, good feelings and bad feelings about them, and always look forward to addressing them as opposed to just having an opinion, having an emotion, and just letting it sit there.
And Ryan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just quickly. And I know I sound like an absolute broken record, and I know Alan's not here anymore. I'm just going to piggyback on my email and last conversation. There's a lot of really good resources out there that the budgeting doesn't necessarily, it can't happen every year, but for something that's in a progressive year like this, that we're looking at this policy, there's a lot of really great resources that we can rely on and bank on. And I know the chief said, we don't have anybody who can man it every day. And not countermanding him, but the Manlius police do post almost every single day, and they're high quality, huge content, really well written, thought out posts. So how do we help with that to take that strain off? There's a lot of different things that maybe other community members who that is their strength. I'm a nonprofit professional. Alan is as well. There's a ton in our community, also municipality professionals who work with this type of thing. And that's also, and I'm not a mental health professional, but that kind of tone of it's okay to ask for help. There are other places that we can do that too. And my last thought, and again, just a broken record on the social and the marketing and the everything else to get the message, whatever that message is, out. That the ounce of good is worth like 10 pounds of pain. So the more that we can be proactive in the messaging, both from the community and from the police together as a community, is so much more beneficial than trying to do it retroactively, because it's more healing, it's more painful. So if there's something good that can come out of the committee, whatever we come to the consensus of, let's push it hard. And if there are resources to do that, let's bank on some of the people in our community to, even if it's for a year, take that strain off with the expertise we have in the field. So that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think I want to move on to look at the questions that we had submitted. So I think Councillor Deere is going to share his screen, so we can look at them all together and kind of, I don't know if we want to go through them one by one, or if we want to look at them more in general. I do want to let everyone know that this form is still on our website, and we will still be checking it. So it's not going anywhere. If you do have more questions, feel free to fill it out. And that is a good way to contact us if you do have any questions, comments, ideas that come up as we do this work. So I'm gonna let John take it. What do you want? Do you want to go through one by one?
Could I?
Yeah.
Just a structural thing.
Thank you.
And I made some comments. I know some of them were received. Some of these really help to know, are they coming from one person or many people? Because it kind of lets us know about one person's viewpoint that they're collected together. And the other is, which regions of our community are they coming from? Because again, just to make sure that we're getting to everybody. Mm-hmm. The last thing that I'll add to that is I had a couple of contacts. I had one contact with Fred Fisk, who sent that long letter, and he did not receive an acknowledgement of it having come in.
I'm so sorry, yes.
Yeah, no, but I don't mean that as a, again, not as a criticism, but as a point that there should be some way of letting people know that we've received these, and if they give us their name or their email, then we can acknowledge it. Okay. If not, these can be in somewhere that people can say, yeah, there it is, or whatever, just whatever that is. I think, again, letting people know that they're being heard, they're being listened to, and I think that'd be a great thing.
If I have any volunteers who would like to follow up and do that questions, let me know, because my to-do list is a little long.
Well, of these that come in, how many do we know who sent them in?
I will have to look, but I'm happy to.
I'm happy to share in that responsibility of just saying, we got your comment, thank you very much.
Yeah, we can even set up the form to include.
Yeah.
So that should be great.
Yeah.
So, I think everyone's had an opportunity to look at a lot of these questions. We don't have to go one by one, but just understanding, I think a lot of this we talked about, it's, like here, number 14, is RPD accredited? Like, to be fair, if you go to the website, you will find out pretty quickly how well, accredited our police department is. So, I think this is a little bit of, we put it out there and we ask people questions and they, just had a question. So I think that comes back to that like social, but also the community events and how we can be a little bit more intentional in, letting people know that we have a police department to be proud of here. Understanding that there may be some issues, but if we can bring more people in and better understand these issues, this is why I'm looking forward to our presentation that the chief and the police department are going to be giving us, because it'll be able to answer a lot of these, just is this true questions. And I'm very excited that'll be a video that is available for people to watch kind of in perpetuity. Hopefully, we'll look at updating it as time goes on, but this is something that's going to help, if you don't want to go to the website and read something, maybe a video that the police department could share every 3 months on their page, maybe that's what'll get people to watch and learn about the police department. There were a lot of questions on here about types of arrest, use of force, racial bias in our policing, which I think that's something that we need to look for some of the data. I think we'll probably have a couple people who are interested on the committee. I'll work with the chief to try to get some of that data so that we can start breaking that down and better understanding, because it's not just going to be, looking at demographics, but it's also going to be, what does our police department spend the most time doing? I know a lot of that is in that yearly report that comes out, but I'm hoping that we can get some of that data and get, a couple different people looking at it, and that'll help us really guide our, as we write our plan, to address whatever issues we may see in that data. So again, a lot of the questions here are about, training. I think, here we were just talking about this, number 19, how are citizens' complaints reviewed? We'll have the chief touch on that in the presentation so that everybody knows. And then it'll be great for us, because if we want to enhance that procedure in any way, we'll know exactly where we're starting from, and to be able to make some real, suggestions on how we can move that forward. And another question about complaints in number 25, our outcomes made public. And then again, do our police officers use body cameras? Of course they do. Just like with the chokeholds, we were way ahead of it. I'm sure we were pretty up there on the body cameras. And then just some, questions like this: how many traffic tickets are issued a year? Are they broken down by race, ethnicity? If so, what's the result? It's a great project for us to look into, and that way we can start understanding, is there racial bias? And if there is the training that we currently have in place sufficient, or do we need to, look to expanding that? And then here, some other questions. Why was it necessary to have police officers added to our schools when JD just eliminated them? The town board, we had a public hearing. We had an outcry from the public, how much they love the SIROs and the SPOs at the schools. And that goes to show you, this is not it's not a police department that is out of some national organization. This is our police department, and we have a great CIRO program that people in FM and ESM really enjoy and think it adds value. And so it's not a one size fits all.
Can we, sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
So I'm just wondering if committee members, if they have any suggestions.
Well, could I just pause on that very question? Because I think that's something that takes us to the heart of our matter, right? If the community says, we love police in our schools, we want to have them there, we're kind of charged with the question, well, why? Right? What is the difference about us and JD, as an example? Why do we feel we need police officers there? What are they doing that makes them valuable? It could be that they're teaching morals and ethics to the kids. It could be that they're protecting them from some unseen and frightening force that nobody's ever seen. So, I mean, if we don't ask the next question and say, why is it that we're happy that they're there, then we miss our calling, I think. We need to understand why they're.
But Jim, they did. The committee that happened, they did ask all those questions. It was very in depth. And just, okay. John, I don't know if you know this, JD they brought their officer back, just so you're aware of that.
No, and okay, so I'm I guess I'm not trying to argue that decision. What I'm saying is, and so I'm a good example then of somebody who feels like I'm part of the community and don't know the answer to that. And, you know, there was an opportunity for me to learn it and I missed it. Okay, so what do we do about that to kind of say, all right, we've got this bucket of concerns from some people. How do we just address them in a neutral way and say, this is the reason? Because that's all.
Can I?
Yeah, I
Can
think the question is just like like that says that they don't know why. The question says why are they not necessarily a bad thing, but they just want to know why they're there.
Right.
Tony?
Yeah, I just wanted to go off because Jim, I do understand exactly what you're asking, and I sat in on that board hearing, basically after the fact, where it basically just went to go over the timeline that officers are going to be there. Do I think that it's it's an awesome thing that they're there? Yes, but once again, to go along with that, not that there's a problem with them there, but I think Jim raised a question. I'll say for me, for instance, when that committee was held. I don't think I was actually living in Central New York at the time. So when they passed that to add them in there, yeah, it's just a simple question of putting information out there like, yes, they're doing a great job. This is what our SROs are doing in the schools. This is why the public requested more to be added in these schools that did not have them. Because like I said, you got a lot of different people moving into the community now. It's not the people that were born and raised here and then came back here. You have people moving in from different states. You have people moving in from the city to the FM district. So when they see that this was passed, and it's like, okay, well, that's awesome. So why are they there, and what role do they play? It's just one of those questions to know why. And once it's explained to them and the information is put out there, then people are like, okay, awesome, I understand now. But it's just an aspect of not knowing and just wanting clarification of that.
Oh, sorry. Can I?
No, thank you.
No, I just wanted to say, like, we can't say that there's a lack of knowledge in the community and then say, why are you asking that question? So like we can't have it both ways. We have to, if we're encouraging people.
I wasn't saying that he didn't have, I wasn't saying that. I was saying that during the committee, I thought he was saying during the committee, we asked if they wanted it. We said, yes, we didn't ask why. That's what I thought he was saying is during that committee. I wasn't saying that we shouldn't have that information out there. I was saying that during that committee, it was a very, very in-depth process where they did explore why. So that's what I was trying to say, was that it wasn't a one night thing. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to come in and do a vote and yes, it's a yes. It was a very, very exploratory committee with very many people involved. So that's all I was trying to say, was that it
Yeah, no, I get that. What I was more so expressing is that, like, when we're talking about the connecting with the community, we're talking about having the community having access, or the police department and whatever committees are making decisions and the whys of that being more visible. And so when it's not that visible, people are going to have all kinds of questions. And so we're working on becoming really visible, like making the whys and wherefores of that, accessible. And some people don't even have the internet. So there's a question, and some people, we have to deal with what is actually happening, which is people aren't going to the website to see. So if that's the case, then maybe people are too busy. Maybe people just don't know that it's there. We would have to ask that question. And the last thing I wanted to point out was, the last I checked on the Facebook page of the police department, I don't think our committee meeting is published. I think it's just on the town board. So we might want to add it to the actual police page. And to answer your question, Jim, I received information from people from Manoa, Chittenango, Manlius, and Fayetteville.
Yeah, thank you.
So I do want to, so we have these questions, we collected these, and so I think we should focus on action steps on what to do with these. I think one option was an FNQ sheet, frequently asked questions. We could take some of these questions, especially the ones that are repeated, and answer them, and we could put them on our page. I know it's not, I mean, I like the idea of updating the police one as well, and we can work on that. But for this committee, we could do that. We can create a frequently asked question.
Would anybody in particular be interested in kind of, merging some of these similar questions, and that way, because I know one of the other things we're looking at using these for is to present them to the chief and say, in the presentation, we'd love, these are the questions that folks have. If you could kind of center your presentation on those answers, would anybody or any pair of folks be interested in kind of going through these and making them a little cleaner and more straightforward? All right, perfect.
I'd participate. I'd ask that some of these, some people know the answers already exist and it's just a matter of getting the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see them grouped.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some we know the answers are there but need research, and some are just fuzzy and need. So if we could have that broken down, that would help. But I'd be happy to help.
So Christine, if you want to, take a shot at it and maybe, put in a Word doc, if we can try to fit everything. I mean, if it was one page, like we have to balance asking all the questions and asking as many questions as people pay attention to. But if you could just send us a draft of, that, within the next week or two week would be great. And then that way we can get that to the chief. And from that presentation, we'll build out that FAQ, and, we'll already have a deliverable for our committee to say, hey, we got some questions, here's some answers, and here's a presentation that clearly and, straightforward answers those. So that's, I think, how does our police department analyze racial bias, trainings and certifications? I mean, we could go on and on. The chief has given me plenty of his time to explain to all those, and it's always enlightening to find out all the trainings that are there. Maybe some more questions around the, CIRO programs would be great, so people understand, what is the CIRO actually doing? As it's not just a cop in the school. It's a very well thought out, intense process that a lot of people feel adds quite a bit of value to our school systems here. So Elaine, or is there anything else that we were seeing in these that wasn't addressed in this conversation? Anything that we were thinking? Yeah, right.
Just to clarify, he knows that these questions are specifically from the community and we're just reviewing them, not that they're questions from us as a committee, right?
Yeah,
Stupid question. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and we've told him that we're not just going to give him all 50 questions we receive, but we're going to be, bringing it down so that it's, we're translating it to him as this is what the community wants to know about. And I mean, I do think too, I think it'll be very much qualified in the fact that, there are 14 members of the community on this committee. So any of our questions are still, perfectly reasonable questions to kind of put forward, and, anything that we think that we could add. So if anybody has, questions that maybe weren't addressed here, or, something in particular you'd like an answer to, this is the time so that we can really double down and start getting those questions answered, because, as I'm sure Elaine is about to do with the calendar, we have some work in front of us. So I'll stop.
So could I just suggest, Christine, if you're going to take on the consolidation of that you give the committee, a small number of days to look and say, here's what, now that I've seen them all consolidated, here's what I'd like to add, or here's a clarification.
That's great.
During the consolidation, just a quick question on as we consolidate those, how, for some of those questions that are a little fuzzy, that Jim put, are we going to go back and kind of do some research, or are we going to basically reach back out to the chief? Because there was a couple of questions on there that definitely there's no yes or no answer. It kind of goes back to the individuals that asked those questions. Did they know the policy of how to send in whether a complaint or something to the office? And I think John focused on it, was this just lost in the ether? If the person hasn't heard anything back. So I guess I saw a few questions, or one or two questions out there like that. Are we going to basically, someone going to reach back out to the chief and say, hey, this was made, has it, do you know anything about this? Has that person been reached back out to?
And it could also be, some of the questions were, what how does the policy work? We don't need the chief to restate the whole policy if he can just give us a link.
Definitely.
To it. So,
'Cause I know definitely some were basically almost a complaint. And, it seems like the person asked that question never got any feedback or, especially if they made a request to the police department to investigate that.
We know where these came from, so any of those specifics, if anybody sees them, we can absolutely try to get those specific issues resolved, and we can reach back out to those folks. We can absolutely accomplish that.
Definitely.
I think it's also important to recognize that we look at this and we're asking about policy, but there's a difference between policy and procedure, right? So I think some of this is, yeah, we can refer to the policy, but how do you actually implement this? And so anyway.
I think that's really important too about the presentation. That's where, again, we're reading a lot, but we need to hear and really, and normally we would plan an event and go, and can't do that right now. So video it is. I do think too, if we, once we kind of figure out more when the presentation will be, and we get their questions organized, and that, it's still kind of like a meeting or an event. I think the police will answer those questions and do their presentation, but if we can try to keep it open at the end for questions, like in this Zoom format, I think that will be ideal. So that's what our goal is, and we'll try to make that happen.
Quick question, Elaine. We're planning this event, right? And it will be like John said, in perpetuity, it'll be on the website so people can refer to it. But I wonder if you guys would consider maybe making it more than one, because even looking at those questions in the workbook, I wonder, I know the police are busy, I get that. And it would be kind of nice to have a chance to ask more questions than just what we have so far.
Okay, so, go ahead, John.
Well, one of the things I was going to suggest is our initial goal with this presentation was kind of anybody that's here, anybody that's kind of following along at home, to have an opportunity to have those base questions, and also too kind of like a Manlius PD 101 for some folks. So while we might not be able to fit a ton of them in the short term, one thing that we could consider is, maybe in the plan, in the suggestion that we have, is it would be great if once a year, every 6 months, we could have one of these opportunities where, the complaints that are coming in, are those being addressed, and even just doing at the top of it every time 15 minutes of, this is our police department, these are our certifications, this is our training process, hiring process. But that would be, so not just, kind of in the short term to kind of answer those questions, but also we can make a suggestion to say, this type of event should happen on a regular basis. Questions come in this way, and then it can be managed that way. And, that's something that's going to take a little bit more planning. And I know that we do quite a few events like that, where it's open, you can come ask questions. But, as we move to this platform in the new world, maybe that's something that we plan on doing, where, that way you don't have to go to that event. You don't have to go to that one particular thing. It's just, it's almost like the survey. It gets delivered on a regular basis to answer all those questions.
And I did the Citizen Police Academy last spring, and it was very in-depth. And they provided so much information, and they were so passionate. It was amazing. But to take 10 weeks out of, it was a good amount of time that I learned a ton. So there's just so much information that we can share, and I know that they would want to. So I'm looking forward to it.
On podcast.
Yeah, right.
I need a coffee talk with the police weekly.
Oh, because they do. They do the coffee with the cop, and they do Citizen and Police Academy, and all these things that we can't do now. But I know they'll get it back and up and running when it's safe. I know, Nadine, you wanted to say something? Nope, you're all set. Okay. Okay, how's everyone feeling about our action steps? We got an F&Q sheet coming, potentially.
Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. And we're going to be watching a presentation. Then Nope, that's all I got.
What?
And
So I kind of like, I was jotting down those major themes. I think I'll shoot some emails out tomorrow. It sounds, maybe we'll try to get a few people focused on a couple of these issues so that we can start coming up with ideas. Because at the end of the day, we need to come up with ideas. We can definitely cheat off our neighbors and see like what's DeWitt doing that we might like. I mean, technically this is happening across our state. But we need to, as the committee, we got to start putting, pen to paper, start figuring out how do we start moving these things forward. So I'll throw out some ideas, around the transparency, mental health, the surveys, internal issues, a complaint process, all that stuff. We'll see what everyone is most interested in kind of picking up. And then that way, moving forward in these meetings, it doesn't have to be, just a discussion. Like we can say like, we were talking about this, we have questions for the group on how would this be structured? And that way too, I feel like, that way, like we've all got a little bit of like real homework, in addition to the, 300 pages of documents we've been sending out. But then, Elaine, do you want to go over the calendar as it is getting?
Yes, I think it sounds like a good transition to talk about the schedule and our calendar. So right now, currently, our plan was to have our next meeting the 4th Thursday of October. But November, the 4th Thursday is of course Thanksgiving, so that does not work. And then given all this talk about the amount of work we need to do, what is everyone kind of thinking on, I guess, at least looking forward from now till December, because again, with the holiday season, we get a little lost.
So my main concern is that I think we've been charged not with fixing things, but for laying down a path for things to improve. And I feel like if we had a better sense of what that meant, that we could be more efficient in our time going forward. So I'm concerned about if next meeting is just a meeting with the chief to hear all the reports and answers to the questions, that we find ourselves in late November, early December with only 3.5 months to go, and we don't have that real charge in front of us. Yeah.
So what we've kind of laid out is the presentation with the chief won't technically be a meeting.
Okay.
It'll be more of an informational session. Obviously, we should all, if we can, attend so that we can ask further questions, clarifying stuff like that.
Okay.
Because Elaine and I were talking about this today. At the end of the day, this plan is due to the town board by April. But what does that actually mean? That means it's essentially got to be presented to them by the end of February. So that there can be a public hearing and then a vote and ideally a conversation on that. So when I kind of looked at the calendar, and what I was thinking might be best is, probably not meet again in 2 weeks, but 3 weeks, so we can try to fit that presentation with the chief in so that, some questions are answered. Even if it's, we do the presentation 2 days before our meeting, should be sufficient. What I was looking at was a tentative schedule for essentially until the holiday season would be October 15th, October 29th, and then November 12th or 19th, because I don't think we're going to fit a second meeting in, whichever one worked best for everybody. That would give us, just so everyone, is aware, that would give us 3 weeks to the next one. So we'll have some time to get some of that homework done, read some more of those policies. Then we'd be meeting a little rapid fire, whether it was the 15th and the 29th, or it could be the beginning of November, but I think the 29th makes a lot of sense. Ideally, our next meeting, kind of just stops and continues at the next meeting, because I feel like we'll all kind of be up to speed and we'll have some stuff getting done. And then I was going to suggest, like I said, November 12th or the 9th, whatever fit best. That way, prior to, at least Thanksgiving, we have ideally we have an idea of what our plan looks like. What does it include? Does it modify any policies? Does it present new options? Does it expand anything? Does it introduce a new procedure or process? And then that would give us the flexibility to ideally find a time in December to meet. And then January, we could plan to meet 2 more times, essentially to build that draft. And then we, as a committee, could have our own public meeting, probably 2 of them, probably try to shoot for one on like a weekday and one on a weekend, where we just say, hey, this is our draft plan. scrutinize it, let us know what's good, what's bad, get everybody's opinions on it. And then that way we have a little bit of time to iterate on it and really hone it down. Because at the end of the day, we're going to submit this to the town board. The town board will have a public hearing, and then we have to vote on it essentially. And so I would,
yeah.
so I would like to
I
have,
like the idea. My concern is what we've heard tonight is that we have an uninformed citizenry, right? And we put all these meetings out there and not everybody goes to most of them, you know, mea culpa. So I think as a committee, if we can do double duty in trying to get, once we've got a plan, that out to the community, not just through a Zoom meeting once or twice, but, you know, say, okay, we're going to carry this out forward somehow. And we should talk about how we're going to do that.
so one thing we could look at, we could think about mailing some information to folks to say, hey, this is happening. You might not be aware it's happening. Another thing too is we would have to be very careful, obviously, but we could do a neighborhood walk or two. We could produce flyers and, you know.
So I'm just saying, let's consider that. I don't want to solve that one now, but let's consider that really community outreach here will be really valuable in the long run, because that's what we're trying to build for Manlius is a better connection. And this is our chance to do it differently. So.
Absolutely. So I think that's definitely something to keep in our minds. Let's figure out what avenues do we have that I think one of the often underlooked things is we can put out a flyer and find every billboard in town and make sure it's letting people know, hey, this is a conversation that's happening. Don't get left behind. But also too, like finding the folks in the community that are well connected and engaging them and saying, hey, do us a favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds great. So I guess that's another thing we need to consider, but also too, we're doing the legwork. So, if we want the police to be more, out there and putting out that information, we'll see what works. So right off the bat, I guess the 15th of October, the 29th of October, and then the 12th or 19th of November, is that going to pose any major issues for anybody?
Can you say that again? 15th, 29th.
October 15th, October 29th, and then let's say November 12th. Ideally sooner rather than later.
Will you put those in the next email coming up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But okay, so it sounds like we're good with kind of the pace. So what we'll do is we'll throw that in the email. We'll make sure, if we've got to move something a day or two to make it fit for everybody, we'll do that. But we'll those are all Thursdays at 6:30. Fits the structure we've been using. Cool.
Very good.
Bill?
May I make a suggestion? We're sort of spotlighting or putting the spotlight on Manlius Police Department. I would like to suggest that we put the spotlight not only on Manlius Police Department, but on the public as well. How can the Manlius Police Department improve? How can the public improve as well as part of our suggestions? Otherwise, it's just we're spotlighting the Manlius Police Department. It's talking about a community effort as a team. So I'd just like to throw that out down the road.
I think the overarching theme to all of this is communication.
Right.
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 If you have good communication, good things will happen. If you don't, if it breaks down, then the system breaks down. So we're trying to foster that communication, and that's a good thing. I think it's also good, to Bill's point, that if the community, maybe the community doesn't know what the police expect when they're pulled over. Maybe the people, there isn't an awareness. You're not going to get factual information from movies and TV. So, if you have what should I tell my kids to do? I had a bad experience or I had a good experience and it worked for me. Should I say the same thing? Well, here's what the police this is what they would like to see. And these are the cues that may alert an officer that things are not, not well. So in the spirit of communication, and to Bill's point, maybe that's, that's kind of like their wish list of, hey, we don't want you to be freaked out. We want this to be a reasonable, encounter. Here's the things that we look for to keep it that way. Just a thought.
May I? Philosophically, correct me if I'm wrong. I've been in education for 50 years. Maybe I'm a dinosaur, but are we asking our students, our children, to question authority? And I think we do. And I don't find that bad. How does that apply when an officer pulls you over and you question authority? You can't, it's not a, you see the dichotomy of what I'm implying? And it's a philosophical thing down the road, which I'm sure we could spend some more time on.
And I
I
think
think just a response of when I don't respond correctly, your response to that, is that appropriate or not? Because I'm already triggered. So I think it's all the scope of the whole mental health and awareness.
Yeah.
And you don't know who you're pulling over, so you have no idea what they're about to say. How do we react to no matter what is being said either way?
Yep.
So yes, I do think the public should know about what police officers are looking for when they pull you over or whatever. But it's same thing on the other side. Police officers have to know that not everybody, I guess, knows the right terminology to say to a cop, or if they're upset, or whatnot. I should be able to be upset without, something bad happening to me as well, or vice versa. I agree.
And also there's a question about like the idea of authority. So I think there's a pushback on that as well of, the citizenry and the police department are supposed to be part of a community. And so if the police are pulling you over, how do we work together for everyone to be safe or create communication and signals? And I just think that there's, who's in charge isn't as much of the conversation as how do we make this successful? I think that's what creates the divisiveness around this languaging that keeps coming up around us and them. So I'd like us to work together on that.
And I think something, I think it's trust. I think it's citizens trusting the police to do their job and enforce, the laws, even in traffic laws, that's their job. They have to do that. And then it's also, the police trusting that the citizens are engaged enough to know, what does an ideal traffic stop look like? Not to put the responsibility on the citizen, but if we trust each other, but that also kind of plays into, looking at a complaint process where if you feel victimized and you don't have a way to, essentially solve that problem or find some, resolution to it, you're inherently not going to trust the next officer that stops you. And so making sure that it's open and transparent and that it's, fair to everybody involved, I think that'll go a long way in building that trust among our community. I think you said it the right way, Christine. We're all a community. We need to work together on this.
It's a relationship. And that's why I don't want it to see as like someone above anybody else. I want us to, I do want to know what to do when an officer pulls me over. And I think I want to know what not to do, So I think that's a great point, Bill. Anyway.
Yeah, I think where we're going, the main layout, like Jim put, is laying that path of where we're supposed to go and getting there. And communication is what's going to get us there. I mean, going back to the old commercials, the more you know, the more we know, the more the public knows, and opening those lines of communication back and forth with our police department is going to put change forward. It's going to clear up a lot of those, misnomers of right and wrong. Like I said earlier, basically making sure that the Manlius Police Department, which was why I raised the question of the hiring process, making sure that someone that should not be a part of the Manlius Police Department doesn't sneak through the cracks. And if something happens, like I said, there's no magic potion that person is dealt with appropriately. But as soon as those lines of communication open up and we open that path up and start those lines of communication, it is going to start a positive change, and the more people are going to know, and we're all going to be better off for it.
Thank you. So I will check in to make sure everyone's all set with these comments, but I do want to, I wanted to kind of reserve the last 10 minutes for talking about, like we did get some policy and we're going to be reviewing those. So how would that, what would that look like for our next meeting? Just so I can kind of plan. Is it going to be open discussion? Are we going to all read the policy, take our own notes? You know, so I'd just like some discussion on kind of how are we going, or kind of what thoughts do we have on taking 14 people to review some of this documentation? Any thoughts?
What's the plan for the meeting on the 15th? It may have already been stated and I missed it, so forgive me, but is that where we're going to meet, or the chief is going to meet back with the committee, or?
Yeah. Yes, I'm gonna we'll make sure he's available to meet with us, so that way he will be, of course, part of the conversation. And then too, like if we decide that if we want to break out into smaller groups, if that's more productive, we can do that, and we can make sure there's other officers here maybe to help us facilitate that discussion. I mean, it's all like, that's what I kind of want to figure out, so that way I can plan accordingly and facilitate that.
Oh, I think the idea for the next meeting was the policies we sent out, and then everyone got the table of contents to see all the policies. So I don't want to, you know, right now our goal is, we tried to isolate the ones that were called out in the executive order or part of the conversation that we're having. And what I was thinking is, you know, if next meeting we kind of review those policies and talk about them. So if everyone's done their homework, and I know when I read the use of force policies, I basically just took a piece of paper and just started writing down things that either didn't make sense to me or that I had questions about. And what I found myself doing is, as I was reading the policy, I was like crossing all my questions out, and a couple did rise to the top. And, you know, I had a couple ideas. I'm like, oh, maybe we could word this, or maybe this was missing. But I think it's more so, is that how we want to have a discussion of, like, I saw this issue that I would like to have a conversation about, or I was thinking that this could enhance this policy to better serve the residents. I don't know necessarily how we would otherwise have a conversation like that, but just making sure, planning for success for that meeting.
I feel like this could get daunting. When we went out, we redid a whole general orders policy book at ESM schools many years ago. And what we did was, they sent us the policies well in advance. We sent them the questions prior to the meeting, because you don't want to have all this going on. You don't want to have 14 people asking their question. You want to have one person saying, okay, so 8 of you asked this one question. This is what we're going to do. So I feel like you want to have the policy given out well in advance, and the people who have the questions need to be responsible enough to send you the questions, because once those are submitted to Elaine or John, I mean, if questions come up, obviously, when you're in the meeting, sure, but it's not a free-for-all, you know what I mean? So, like, it needs to be organized, or it's going to take forever to go through. The use of force policy could take all night to go through. So I feel like giving us
discussion. Like a moderated discussion.
Yeah, but I feel like you have to have your questions in prior to this meeting, because it makes you have to read it and think about it first.
Yeah, I think that I completely agree. That's really will organize everything.
That makes sense. I have a concern, and I have it from what I saw that DeWitt was going to go over. You know, so much of this has to do with force and deadly force and all that. And my impression is that that's not a big deal in our community. I could be wrong, and I'd like to know if I am. But if force and deadly force is not the main issue that our police are wrestling with, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best place for us to be trying to work with them. I'd rather work with them in an area where they're working more, and that's.
Can I just address that?
Please, yeah.
I agree with you, Jim, on that. The problem is that is the #1 issue that's facing our nation right now. So we have to address that first. I think we have to get that off the table. And I think we just have to we have to lay that out. And here's the scary, terrifying thing about being a police officer and being a citizen. This use of force thing could happen today. It could happen in an hour. It could happen tonight. It could happen any moment of any day. this use of force thing could rear its ugly head, and all of a sudden we're on the front page of the paper. I want to be prepared for that. So yeah, I would agree that the deadly physical
I'd
force.
rather contextualize it rather than just say, this is the biggest, scariest thing, so let's deal with it first. Then that what tells everybody is, this is a big, scary thing, and we've got to worry about being scared. I'd rather be able to say, look, if it gets to a situation where we need force or deadly force, we've got to have our ducks in a row, and we're doing that. And 90% of what the police deal with are drunken drivers and house break-ins, or whatever it is. I'm making that up. I don't know.
Sure.
And that's where the community and the police really need to work together. It's not that we can't talk about or shouldn't talk about use of force, but if it's only happening once a year, then I don't know that that it deserves to be first.
It's just a different mindset, Jim. It's just, I think that, yeah, I see what you're saying, but the world right now is on fire because of use of force. It's not the town of Manlius isn't on fire, but we have.
We've just spent this hour. We've just spent this hour saying we're different.
Right, but this committee was created to address that specific problem. So I feel like we just have to address that specific problem and get it off the table, and then we can move on to the other issues. We don't have to make a big fuss out of it. What could come out of it is that we have a great use of force policy, and our officers are really well trained. That could be what comes out of it, but that's what we have to look at.
And I think that was more so like when Elaine and I were trying to figure out kind of like how this happens, is we have a pretty clear directive to review these policies in the executive order. And I think the hope was to do that. One, it gets us familiar with the speak that a lot of us, I'm sure, are not familiar with. If you read those policies, it's, you know, it's like reading something that you're not familiar with, maybe even a different language. If we can do that analysis now, what I'm hoping is that not only can we have a discussion about it, but as we move forward and start talking about maybe ways we expand and grow our police department and adapt, we'll have all that knowledge about the policies, and something might come up later in the conversation that says, you know what, now that we've talked about all of this, maybe there is something in that policy, or maybe something comes to mind, but if we know we have to do this. So if we focus on that right now, I think it'll make ourselves, this committee, more productive later on, because we'll have time to come back.
Yeah, and I just, from a PR perspective too, we don't want the community thinking that we're gaslighting them by softballing the issue either. So if we come out hard and fast, these are the policies, and implement it, that's also going to go to that community trust issue, that we have gone hard and addressed it and found here are our results of our finding after going hard to address it.
I would just reiterate the need to contextualize it. If we need to do it first, we do it first, but let's contextualize it from the very beginning and say, in our town, police use of force happens 3 times every 4 months. You know, and no value judgment, just put the context out there. Home break-ins happen, this, whatever it is, take the top 10 and say, this is what our police force is all about.
Yes.
We recognize that the use of force is the most dangerous thing there, so we want to address that first. But we don't want you to think that the only thing we're doing is saying we think the use of force is good or bad. You know, so I just context helps all the time.
And some of that information too is in the annual report. All the calls that they get, what kind of things.
Once again, it's transparent, but it's, you know,
It's
where
in
do
there.
we look? How do we look? How do
Yep.
we digest it? Yeah.
So some of that information we can get right from there, and then, but we do need to get more of the demographics and stuff. Okay, so what I was hearing was let's read the policies and send John or I questions. Okay, and then based on those questions, I think John and I can get a sense of, okay, this policy is going to take a long time. This one might be a shorter one, and then we can try to figure out to plan those meetings. So I'm trying to keep these meetings 2 hours.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I don't help you, but I appreciate it. Could we get if you're going to do that, could you send us the priority list that you want us to read them in? Because again, it's hundreds of pages, and
Well, so we did send, I think it was, I want to say 12 in total.
Okay.
There's the 4 that are use of force. I think those, because of where we're at, I think we focus on those. And then from there, I just, again, Elaine and I work together to figure out a couple policies to look at. But again, I would suggest maybe this week, maybe by the end of the weekend, if you look at that table of contents we sent out, if you see something that we didn't include that you think is an important conversation to have, that's why we have 12 or 14 people on this committee. So call out those. I'll work with the chief to get those. And then that way, we can be prepared to have those conversations. And what we'll do, the agenda will reflect the conversation, the questions and comments that we're getting.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say one thing. And as we reflect upon these policies, I just want to, say that what's written, what's said, and what's done also need to make sure it's like worded correctly and how we, go forward with all those things. Because I can write something beautifully, but what I say is something different, and then what I'm doing could be something as well. So just, whole big scope of how we as humans even are and how we interact with each other as well. That's all. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, are we all set? Motion to adjourn?
Run away.
Thank you very much,
Are
everybody.
we all set? All right, have a good night.
Great
Thank
conversation.
you all. Good night.
Bye, have a good night.
Have a good night.